Okay, well, this is probably a good time to get started. I want to introduce Carl Giametti, and he's going to be the presenter today. Do you want to? He's going to share his slides.
Okay, is that my signal to go ahead?
Yes, yes,
All
thank you.
right. If you give me a thumbs up when you get our slides, and all right. Well, thanks so much for having myself and Annette here. Just do kind of brief introductions. Again, my name is Carl Giametti. I'm a professional architect here in Chicago, and I'm a former board member and president of the Chicago Ornithological Society, along with Annette and Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, as well as the Chicago Bird Alliance. We ended up starting, gosh, it's been what, 8 years now, 9 years, started Bird Friendly Chicago, a joint group among those three organizations to push for bird friendly buildings. Annette, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself before we get rolling here?
Yeah, my name is Annette Prince. I'm the director of Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, a not-for-profit organization that's working on the issues of rescuing and protecting birds from the hazards of bird collisions. I'm on the board of the Chicago Bird Alliance and the chair of Bird Friendly Chicago, which, as Carl said, is a collaboration that was formed to try to institute bird-friendly measures within the building operations in Chicago.
And so the presentation that Annette and I have for you here today was really derived from a longer presentation that Annette and I have given a number of times, really introducing bird-friendly building measures to folks. What does it look like in terms of its impact on buildings? Why Chicago is an issue? What is the scale of the problem? And then what we're doing as a group and how you can be involved in this effort. So we'll probably go through some of these slides fairly quickly because I know as the topic has gotten more and more out there, people have become more familiar with this stuff. So someone who's probably a little bit repetitious for folks, but we'll go ahead and get started here. So again, like I said, the Bird Friendly Chicago is really a joint, started as a joint effort between these three groups. We've had some other welcome additions recently to the group, like with the Feminist Bird Club and other organizations like that we are thrilled to have as partners and definitely welcome more and more involvement. Um, so starting out, really briefly here, the problem of birds, buildings, migration in Chicago. I think everyone here, has some sense as to how amazing of a city for birds Chicago is, and really, what are the conditions that cause that. And a lot of it really has to do with our position in the country and the lake. Our prevailing winds come out of the west, and they push a lot of our migratory birds up along the lakefront. Songbirds generally are loath to fly over water. It's not a very protected area for them. If they get tired, there's no place to come down and perch. And so they really do pile up along the lakefront here, and the wind really, our prevailing winds really play a lot into that. The unfortunate side of this is that we decided to build our lovely city right on the lakefront. And so we have our shining glass buildings built right in an area that's seeing the most concentration of birds. Um, and it's a big problem. Like so, up to 1 billion birds die each year in window collisions. And the National Audubon Society State of the Birds indicated that this is one of the precipitating factors is why we've seen 30% of American bird populations dropping in their population. And one of the things that probably first brought this to the forefront of the wide public, obviously folks in birding circles have known this is an issue for a while, is the event that took place on October 5th last year. And Annette certainly experienced that in a very personal fashion. And Annette, if you want to kind of touch a little bit on what happened October 5th last year.
Yeah, October 5th was an instance where we had a weather pattern that was favorable for birds to be moving. And we had a buildup of birds that hadn't moved for quite a while. So the birds in the fall tend to want to travel when there's winds from the north. So an enormous number of birds that had built up began to travel. There was a front that was moving into Chicago, as well as low cloud cover, which keeps the birds flying a little bit lower, closer to the cities and not up and away from the urban lighting and other dangerous attractions for them. So all that combined, and the fact that on a darkened lakefront where the birds are navigating, McCormick Place left its lights turned on without their curtains drawn, and that amount of light pouring onto the lakefront pulled in more than 1,000 birds that died, and then there were injured birds, and we picked up another 2,000 birds with our monitors in the downtown area that doubtless were pulled in also by the idea that bright lights that should have been shielded were throwing off birds' navigation system, and 1,000 birds in one day was certainly something for that took a lot of notice. And even though this building, McCormick Place, has been killing almost 10,000, killing 1,000 birds a year over the 40 years of its lifespan, so there have been tens of thousands of birds killed by this building, but 1,000 in one night really got people's attention. And for unfortunate reasons, it has gotten some notice from people to be able to want to make some changes, particularly at McCormick Place. Did you want me to talk about what McCormick Place is doing right here, Carl? Or are you going to talk about that later?
Sure, you could touch on some of the improvements that have happened.
Okay, so as a result of this finding of or realization in one day what could happen, McCormick Place has been addressed with the idea that they need to find a way to have more efficient ability if they have to leave lights on at night to be able to block that lighting. And they're as we understand, looking into ways to add more efficient shades and curtains as opposed to something that has to be pulled laboriously. They're going to try to get a more efficient modern system that with the touch of a button will be blocking light and thereby not attracting birds toward the building. And they're looking at ways to put treatments on their glass because they have 2 football fields of glass on that building. And if there's a way to add films or barriers in front of that glass so birds aren't striking it, it will even double down on the protections that that building really should have had for over the 40 years that it's existed there. And we're hopeful that they've put in bids to add improvements. If they don't fix all of the glass, they're certainly going to address the areas that are the most critical, which would be the east side in particular, because it's what faces the lakefront and one of the first encounters birds have with buildings as they're heading into the Chicago area.
And so that's really just one building contributing to this unfortunate designation that Chicago has as being the most dangerous city for migratory birds. It's something that came out of a Cornell study looking at collision data, radar, and where birds concentrate. And it's really an unfortunate title that we have to hold on to as a city. And so, looking at these big 3 questions: what in fact are the problems with our buildings? And in a word, it's glass. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone here, but there's really a couple different qualities of glass that make it problematic. One, glass is reflective, and so we like to put trees and build our buildings next to parks and stuff like that. And so you can see the instance here. I believe this is the Art Institute, here in Grant Park, major migratory stopover spot. And we also have lots of trees in Grant Park. And as humans, we learn certain symbols, building qualities, areas that we expect glass to be. And so that tells us, hey, there's glass there, that's a reflection. Everyone said, well, why don't the birds just learn to see glass? Like, well, we can't learn to see it either. We just know it's there because we're humans and we learn what humans build and we understand buildings. And so you have a situation like this where the bird sees a tree reflecting into the bird, that just looks like a tree. The other part of it is that glass is also transparent. So, when you put something like this is a building that's actually nearing completion right on Michigan Avenue, Essex, at the park. I will see what their interior pool atrium looks like. But if they end up putting these trees behind clear glass, again, if they can't see anything that's small enough that a bird can read as glass, they're going to see this tree in this atrium and be like, hey, I can go perch in that. And that leads to a really problematic situation. And this can also lead to some really unfortunate situations, especially when you have these sky bridges. On that October 5th date, as Annette said, it wasn't just McCormick Place, but My son goes to elementary school in the South Loop, and they have one of these glazed side bridges. And I think I collected 15 or 18 dead birds that were literally dropping on the kids as they wait to go in school because they, congregate under the sky bridge when they're waiting to go into school. And so it was really a pretty gruesome sight, and it was not a pleasant experience for the kids. So yeah, this passage effect is particularly deadly. And Annette mentioned, especially in McCormick Place, where they light that thing up like a Roman candle, and it brings birds into light. Just as bugs are attracted to light at nighttime when we have this glowing city, it draws birds in and can interfere with their navigation system. And so light pollution becomes a very big issue. So we know these problems. Again, this is probably something that folks here have heard multiple times. What are the solutions to make our buildings bird safe? Well, at home, what you can do is pretty easy implementable. Is you can get things like bird tape, and the bird tape has a nice little measurement on the box. It tells you what is the spacing that you can install this at to treat your windows at home. It's fairly inobtrusive. And this is really just the quickest solution. You don't need to change your glass. You just get some inexpensive bird tape, and you can put it up and stop collisions from happening at home. You know, Homes don't kill a lot of birds individually, but because, oops, sorry, my light in the room just went off. But because millions of our single family homes do probably kill one or two birds a year, collectively they have a very big impact. And so if we can treat our homes, that's a good way to make us a small and quick difference. There are some natural solutions. A lot of times, if you have mullions, dividing up your lights of glass, it reduces the size of these panels. It's something that we've been putting in our homes for years and years and years. And the general spacing of all these things is considered to be, a 4-inch vertical spacing or a 2-inch horizontal spacing, or the 2x4 rule. There's some recent evidence that 2x2 is actually the better spacing, especially when you're talking about preventing strikes for smaller birds like creepers, kinglets, hummingbirds, things like that. But right now, the general guidance is a 2x4 spacing. On the commercial side, where we're talking about trying to treat buildings that make up a smaller percentage of our building stock, but themselves can account for some of our most deadly conditions, there are any number of commercial solutions that exist, and this is really what Bird Friendly Chicago is trying to address with the Sustainable Development Policy, as well as a Bird Friendly Building Ordinance. So here you can see a secondary facade of screens that probably didn't have any thought of making the building bird safe, but wanted to use it as a design feature. And so it really just shows how bird-friendly building is really just not an island in terms of sustainable building strategy, but really pairs well with a number of other solutions. This is the Aqua building here in downtown Chicago. One thing of particular note here is the type of railing that they used. Instead of using glass railings that really disappear to the eye, they used a vertical picket railing, and this is really a nice bird-safe approach to commercial and residential building. And one building that I always like to point to is the Spertus Institute for Jewish Learning. It's an entire 100% glass facade, but they incorporated fritz or etching, patterns applied to the glass to the building. And as a result, it ends up, for 100% glass facade, ends up being a reasonably bird safe building. And so there are really any number of tools out there that can be used to make a building bird safe. And these are just three of the largest glass manufacturers globally, and their bird friendly glass portfolios have really expanded in the past 10 years. And the nice thing is that as bird-friendly building becomes more widespread and adopted, the incremental cost of adopting these things has dropped significantly. So, one of the common arguments from the development community is, oh, these things are really expensive. Well, as New York City has adopted ordinances, as cities around Toronto, as other cities have adopted it, the cost of this glass has dropped more and more, and that's pretty typical with any new technology. When LED light fixtures first came out, they were very expensive. Now, it would be more expensive to try to go find a fluorescent light fixture. And so the more widespread adoption we get, the less expensive bird-friendly building measures will be to incorporate. One other thing too is lighting solutions. A lot of these are already in our commercial building codes, but certainly doing things like using full cutoff light fixtures, time clock lighting controls that turn off site lighting during non-occupied hours are all things that can drastically reduce the light pollution and reduce the number of birds that are being brought into dangerous situations. And so, the last thing is, okay, how do we ensure that our building's bird safe? And that's going to kind of touch on some of the efforts of Bird Friendly Chicago in recent years. And so Annette, just let me know if you want me to kind of jump to another slide here. Talk a little bit about.
Yeah, well, essentially what we did is we've worked with these. I'm still on. I'm muted. Yes, we initially met with the idea that we were hoping to get bird friendly regulations put through as a mandatory code and help develop the specifications. Initially, we just added onto the sustainable development policy that existed back in 2016, and for doing some just basic simple ideas of keeping lights out and trying to incorporate some bird safe features. People could earn points toward the 100 points that they have to have in order to gain their the points for city funding, for permission for permits. Those things were put into place, but very few people chose the voluntary option of earning points by being bird friendly. And we were really looking for something that would be mandatory and something that we could at least get new buildings to incorporate as well as major renovations. We were directed to work with the Department of Planning and Development. And over the last 4 years, after an ordinance saying that bird-friendly measures should be made a priority, we worked for 4 years with the Department of Planning and Development to write out the rationale behind what makes a building safe, what we would ask buildings to do in any projects that were being proposed to the Department of Planning. So we made it something that was measurable. We worked with them on the issues of making it something that could be measured, understood. We created a guide that was going to help architects and developers understand what the point of bird friendly was, because rather than just tell people make your building bird friendly, we were working on the idea of reasonable, measurable policies and procedures that you could do and which areas of the buildings were most critical, because telling someone to fix the entire building seems in many cases unreasonable. But we know that there are critical areas of buildings that we would want to identify and address those as the highest priority. So working together with the Department of Planning, we made what we felt was a pretty reasonable plan that they would then use whenever as a requirement for anyone who was coming for a TIF project or for large high-rise projects. Any planned developments that were going to go out would have to fall under this. So it wouldn't be all the buildings in Chicago, but we felt this would be a major first step to address these projects. After which, then we would go on to more areas of different buildings that would hopefully be under the policy or the measures that we were hoping would be set out. We know that Chicago has always been a leader in light reduction. That's been a voluntary program in Chicago since the late 90s, when buildings are asked during spring and fall migration to turn their lights out. We, after 11 p.m. until the next night or until daylight of the next morning, thereby making the city as dark as possible with any top lighting, any display lighting. And those features are, and hopefully as much interior lighting turned out as possible in order to reduce the amount of attraction that we would present as a city to bring birds into the dangerous urban built environment that we have. Okay, so at this point, the Department of Planning, after making those measures, has been waiting to finalize the entire sustainable development policy, and is projected to be released in 2024. They've sent out surveys to ask people what they think about the priorities in sustainable design should be. And we've asked people from for anyone who is aware of the issues of bird collisions to voice their concerns about making bird safety a priority. And we would like to see these be mandatory, but we have now have the apprehension that they're going to again make it just an optional point system that anyone who's applying to the Department of Planning and Development would only have an option of being bird friendly if they want to earn their points that way. And we're afraid that people won't choose those, and this is too important of an issue to be something that's voluntary. And we want it to be something that would end up being mandatory, just as it's mandatory to have smoke detectors, it's mandatory to have fire extinguishers, it's mandatory to have accessibility to a building. You can't build a building that has a potential to cause harm, and any kind of other safety measures aren't things that developers or architects can choose as optional. So we feel that this is an important enough issue. And we are pressing all the members of the city to have any citizens to voice their concerns over the importance of this being not just an optional thing. If Chicago is such a leader and such a strong hazard for migratory birds, it should also be a leader in architectural design and features that will protect birds.
And Annette, I realized the presentation I opened did not have the slide you inserted in there. So folks, give me just a couple seconds here. I will reshare my screen.
While you do that, and we're just asking that people at this point, April 15th is when they're going to release the policy. We still don't know whether it's going to be mandatory that the bird safety measures that we created will be required. But up until then, we would like people to write to the mayor, to the Department of Planning and Development, and to the Department of the Environment in Chicago, and express your concern that Chicago is a steward of these birds that fly through our city twice every year. They're important, irreplaceable birds that we should be doing all we can to protect. So we've got a slide that Carl will put up that shows you the three, certainly writing to the mayor and then copying the Department of Planning as well as the Department of the Environment will get the message across that it's not simply the people who are interested in birds, but people that are interested in a healthy environment, protecting these birds, and really making Chicago proud of trying to preserve an important part of a global environment. These birds aren't just ours; they're citizens of the world, and they're critical to our own food sources, our healthy environment, and the enjoyment that we get from them. So they have a right to be protected. We're hoping that people will send this message out to the mayor and even your alderman, if you have a connection, letting people in city council know that this is something that we want. Once we go beyond the idea of the Department of Planning mandating it, we want to see what we can do with existing buildings for retrofitting, and what we can do with an expanded number. And our hope is that once the buildings that work with the Department of Planning begin to show examples of how attractive, achievable, and affordable it is to make a building bird friendly, even projects that aren't under mandates to do this will be able to follow suit. There'll be more products, there'll be more availability, and perhaps even lower prices for the kind of products that even a homeowner could use if they wanted to change an area of their house that's dangerous for birds. So we hope that this is going to be the first step towards more and more projects from commercial to residential being bird friendly in our region.
And, yeah, and I would just add that we've had some. There was a recent survey out from the Department of Planning and Development asking people what are your priorities for a sustainable buildings policy in Chicago, and we've received some early word that generally the city of Chicago places a high value on bird life and protecting bird life, and so I think what we're advocating for is definitely in alignment with what the citizens of the city of Chicago want, and the fact that other cities like New York City have passed not just policies but full ordinances. It's unfortunately a little bit embarrassing as a member of the professional building community here in Chicago. For years, Chicago has touted itself as a leader in sustainable building. We for a time had more green roofs than any other city in the country. We had more LEED certified buildings than any other city in the country, and to see us relinquish that mantle in any aspect of sustainable building to one of our peer cities is disappointing. So we're really hoping that folks here today. Like I said, just the fact that you're here probably suggests that you are empathetic to the cause, but we're hoping really to mobilize the bird conservation community, so that way we can allow our voice to be heard and protect birds. Because every project that gets approved that doesn't incorporate these measures, that's another 50 years of that glass until it needs to be replaced, killing birds until something happens to it. So. At this point, I think Annette, unless you had anything else to say on it, I think we're happy to field any questions that folks may have here, and talk more about this topic. I don't know if anyone's dropped anything in the chat.
Is there a correction of the address for the Department of Planning and Development? I see in the chat that Judy has placed, I don't know if that slide had the incorrect one,
I
but
think
if
she just
people
did it
want to
so
check the
people can
chat out.
copy and paste it. Yeah.
I think the previous slide had a slight typo. It had 2 O's in that email.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point, folks can feel free to unmute themselves or raise their hand or drop their questions into the chat and we can help monitor that.
This is Susan. I have a question. Can you
Sure.
hear me?
Yep, we
Yeah.
can hear you. Yep.
When are the lights dimmed? Because sometimes I watch the news and they're showing the weather at night and the lights of the city from their cameras up high. When are the lights dimmed for the migrating birds, like for spring, and when do they go back on?
In the
Annette,
spring,
do you
they're
wanna take
from
that?
the March 15th to June 15th, and in the fall, it's August 15th until November 15th. And we ask that the bright top lighting should be extinguished or turned or dimmed after 11 p.m. So typically news broadcasts, the light reduction mandate isn't there. So if you're seeing shots of downtown prior to 11 p.m., that's before we've asked for light reduction to occur. I know I drove downtown to monitor for birds this morning, and the entire skyline was a dark outline. I saw no top lighting on any of the buildings, and I think that we've had a very successful participation. There are sometimes buildings that change or change their designs, and we have to talk to them about the importance. But by and large, working with the Building Owners and Management Association, we have a great amount of participation in at least the outside lighting. And as I said, as we work with buildings while we're collecting birds downtown, we're talking to them about their lobby lights and how a brightly lit lobby at night can attract a bird into the landscaping or attractive interiors that could be displayed when a bird comes down while it's still dark out. As well as any building that faces the lakefront that could draw a bird off its migratory path and towards the glass surfaces that are so dangerous.
And Annette, I
Okay.
want to use that as a segue too to talk about how bird-friendly building is really just a cooperative element in the entire sustainable building package. By turning off your lights at night when they're not needed, you're saving money, you're saving energy costs. And so, there is an incentive for owners, regardless of whether, helping birds or not, to turn off lights that aren't being used. And luckily the energy code has mandated things like occupancy sensors and things like that that do start to reduce the amount of interior lighting that's being left on when buildings aren't occupied. But even things like adding etches or frits to glass, they reduce what's called the solar heat gain of the glass, and it can help reduce cooling loads. I actually have a project a colleague is working on that they incorporated etches to their glass, not necessarily as a bird-friendly measure, but it helps disperse light coming into the space and reduces the amount of glare that interior occupants get. So it's both reducing cooling loads during the summertime. It's providing better quality light inside, and it's creating a bird-friendly building. And so it really is just something that there is a very cooperative a natural partnership among certain groups to employ these measures. However, and I think this is Terry's question in the chat, what are the main obstacles to ordinance acceptance? The group that is typically most opposed to this are for-profit developers. Typically when institutions, public institutions especially, are building measures like this, they represent the taxpayer interests and stuff like that. And so it's a little bit easier to influence those measures. And in fact, there have been ordinances passed that do apply to Cook County's public buildings, Illinois' public buildings, but that represents a very small portion of the buildings that are out there. Most of them are profit incentivized developers. And so because there is sometimes a cost if you're going to choose the most straightforward, I'm not going to change anything about my building design, all I want to do is the easiest solution, there is a cost increase for bird friendly glazing. It's dropping significantly again as more manufacturers incorporate this into their portfolio. In terms of things like lead times, there really is no difference in lead times between bird friendly glass and regular glass now. Where there is a difference, it's negligible, a matter of just a couple of weeks. And so that is generally the main opposition to bird-friendly building. So there's also a question from Sue B. I'll read it out here in case you're not reading the chat. Do you have references for seasonal window treatment options to reduce bird strikes? That would be something like the bird tape. It's typically only implementable on single-family residences. It's not really practical for a large facility to every spring put up some sort of measure, then take it down at the end of migration, then put it back up in the fall. What we do see a lot of commercial or public facilities that do want to do something about bird strikes is that they'll apply an exterior film to the glass. This is actually a solution that Northwestern University, after undergoing a campus-wide assessment of their buildings, determined that a number of them were particularly hazardous, applied bird film to the exterior of their windows. That's a fine solution. It's not great. I think Judy's on here. She may be able to talk a little bit more about some of the initial conversations they had with Northwestern during design to try to avoid these issues. Unfortunately, that advice was not heeded, and at least to their credit, they went back and applied exterior film. But that's usually the least effective and most costly solution to treat it after construction's been completed.
We work with buildings on things that they can do seasonally to improve safety on their buildings. Some of them put up temporary screening. We work with the Chicago Botanic Garden that have a system of both framed and extendable screens that they put on the outside of their glass during the spring and the fall. And they can just have them temporarily up in a way that it's a barrier between the birds and the glass. The birds can either land or bounce off the screening. And it allows the people from the inside still to be able to look out in the gardens because you don't want to obstruct a view for something that's meant to be for guests to be able to look out. But they can do that temporarily, and when the season's over, they can take the screening down. We've had some schools and other even buildings downtown that have been willing to use temporary paints, and it's a great thing for some nature centers to do during the spring and fall migration period, to put up paints that will put that pattern that gives birds the idea that there's something in the way, there's something that covers that surface and doesn't make it look like something that they can either fly through or even be able to see the reflections, because the paint essentially makes that surface look solid to them. So temporary paints, temporary barriers are options that several of the buildings that we work with have adopted.
I'll take Eric's question for turning lights off at night. Do you get many counter arguments from public safety organizations saying that leaving external lights on at night decreases crime rates? So typically the existing ordinances that are on the books when it comes to light pollution require full cutoff lenses. And basically what that means, I kind of had that little illustration, is that the light cone goes down to the ground. Having a light that just shines upward doesn't do anything for anyone's safety. Illuminating the building with upward light doesn't do anything for anyone's safety. It's really an aesthetic decision. And so, having exterior lights that illuminate the ground rather than shining upwards is really the key thing there. And again, the nice thing is that this has long been an ordinance in most communities, mostly from a nuisance standpoint. Typically, when you're doing a new building project, you have to submit what's called a photometric plan, which is basically a calculation of all the light levels around the building. And typically, you're not allowed to throw light off of your property. And so it really is not received much of an opposition from public safety organizations, because the most effective safety light is light that typically is fairly bird safe.
You can have the light directed to where you need it, so you're
Right.
not really telling people to have an absence of light. And in some cases, lights that are too bright have been proven to make it easier for people to be unable to check their surroundings. So overly bright lighting at night can cause a confusing, higher actually safety risks than you would think. So directing light to where you need it can keep it away from birds, as well as uh, allow you to have the safety features that you need.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that sometimes really bright light creates more contrast, which means the darker areas adjacent to those bright lights become darker. So having low, even light levels is a much more effective public safety measure and better for the birds as well.
And to
Christine,
answer your question, we do
yeah.
work with the Astronomy Dark Sky Associations. Chicago Bird Collision Monitors works along with them because we're certainly all asking for this same awareness. There's a statewide ask now to get darker skies, more lights out, because we really all see the benefits. There are health benefits to humans for less light at night. There's benefits to people that want to see the stars at night. In For a lot of different wildlife, having night is better for them. For humans, we are programmed to have certain periods of darkness in our biology, and if we lack that, we often have irregularities that occur in our health. And so it's another win-win situation where a lot of things would benefit from darker skies. A lot of buildings would benefit from the measures that are bird friendly. There will be other gains from those, as well as protecting the birds.
To Christine's question here, the best way to engage in a building's bird friendliness, it varies. Some buildings are built under ordinances that would just make what they're doing. It's generally referred to as by right, meaning the ordinance is on the books and the building complies with that. For projects like that, you typically don't have an easy a time as a member of the public commenting on what's going on. For projects, specifically ones that would fall under sustainable development policy, those are projects that typically do have to go to like a public hearing process. And I can say, usually being on the design team side of it, if a member or members of the public show up asking for something specifically, and it's the old squeaky wheel gets the oil, that if you show up at public board meetings, if you express your concern to your alderman or your local village board members, those things do tend to get heard. And so if there is any ability to get public engagement in for these projects, that really is going to be your best bet. And again, I've been at dozens and dozens and dozens of plan commission meetings, and they tend to be very lightly attended. So if someone actually shows up and asks for something, that voice gets heard. So for any projects in your community, if you live in the city of Chicago, talking to your alderman is the best way to do it. Join any community organization that follows projects, go to public engagement sessions. Those are great ways to do it. If you live in the suburbs, your local community probably has a plan commission or a zoning board of appeals. Finding out when those meetings are and what projects are on the docket, that's really the best way to make your voice heard, specific to individual projects. More generally, the information that Judy posted in the chat, reaching out to your public officials and saying this is something that needs to be on the book, so that way it's not a matter of individual projects, asking individual projects to comply.
Thanks. Can I follow up there?
Yep.
So it sounds like the best thing I can do at this point is to check in with my alderman. Do all developments, I am in the city of Chicago, and this development is in the city of Chicago. Mm-hmm. Do all developments go through the building commission?
No.
Okay.
Only not all do, although just guessing at Harlem and North Avenue, that's a pretty major intersection. Yeah. Most of the major thoroughfares at major intersections end up landing in something or another, or they need to ask for special uses or variances or their planned developments. So there is a likelihood that could still be subject to it. Now, buildings are only subject to the laws that are on the books when they apply for a building permit. at that point, the laws they need to comply with are pretty much locked in. So if they've already started construction,
Yep.
unfortunately, that you usually lose that opportunity. But if they've started and stopped, who knows what's going on? Things fall apart all the time and things restart. So it's always worth a call, even if it may be too late for that project, just to try to get, let your alderman's office know this is a topic that's important to you and you want to see your alderman take a lead on it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That helps a lot. And we do have a community organization that I could try to pull into engaging with this. So again, to your point, if not this for future, this is really helpful. Thank you.
One of the most important things Carl did touch on is that when people talk about the added expense for making a building bird friendly, really reinforcing to them that trying to we've been told, well, we'll wait and see what happens once we've built the building and then retrofit it if it turns out birds are hitting the glass. That is could almost be double the cost of a building if you're going to try to retrofit it afterwards. Putting it already into the initial designs and having bird safety measures just in the way it's designed or in the materials that are used is an inconsequential addition to the cost. So one thing that can sometimes convince people is the idea that this is not going to add that much if you do it up front. Whereas if you wait till afterwards and you're trying to repair the damages that are being done, it can be monumental and in some cases impossible. We have buildings downtown that have glass at 50-story heights that we'll never be able to reach and retrofit, and it'll be too late to do anything, even if the will was there to do it. So incorporating those safety measures initially is a cost-saving measure, and then there'll be benefits for some buildings. We're trying to say that it's going to it has the advantage that a property will be more appealing if it's bird friendly. So property value could go up. So there's things you can gain and value add to your construction if you're doing bird friendly, both from the idea that you're going to save energy eventually, you're not going to have to retrofit later on, you're going to have an appealing property that is can be advertised as being bird friendly, and you'll have energy cost savings. So there's a lot of things that you gain when you do the bird friendly. And we also talk about how it promotes development of industry, because there are more companies that are in the city that are making glass that's bird friendly. So it's going to promote jobs. It's going to promote the entire employment of a whole group of people that are going to be working to institute bird friendly measures. And I think it's something that's positive from another aspect, just because of that, the advantage of promoting bird friendly materials being used.
I don't think anyone considers showing up at your office or walking out of your building in the morning and being surrounded by dead wildlife to be an amenity. So it's something no one wants to finish their nice new building, and next thing you know, you have this big problem that could have been easily prevented during design. And again, the fact that major glass manufacturers are adopting this, they wouldn't do it if they didn't see the way the industry is going. And so it's really time for Chicago to get on board, or we'll just continue to fall more behind. Any other questions? I don't think I have anything else on my side. Annette, if there's any last items you want to.
No, we really just want everyone to weigh in and let your friends, neighbors, other people let the city know that this matters to all the citizens. This is not just a niche issue that bird watchers are interested in. These birds are important for all of our health, for all of our future environmental protection. And the more that the city officials hear from us and hear that it's from every of the citizenry in Chicago, that it's important to us. We're hoping that they are going to listen to this and not ignore this problem any longer.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, this is Susan. I have another question for Annette. Do you notice bird collisions in some of the suburbs? Do you have any information?
We do know that they occur everywhere. We monitor a downtown area because it's something that we have the resources to survey on a regular basis. But there isn't an office park, a building along the lakefront, a building in the suburbs, an office tower that doesn't have. We get reports from people of huge numbers of bird strikes. So when we say that we collect somewhere between 7 to 10,000 birds a year in downtown, we know you multiply that out to all the square miles of downtown. We're just looking at maybe 2 square miles of the city, and we're not finding everything. We're just finding what we find in a few hours and what we can get to, because there are hundreds or thousands more birds up on rooftops and awnings that we never find. So when we say 10,000, if you extrapolate that out to every residential, commercial building in the Chicago region, we're talking hundreds of thousands of birds die every in Chicago from collisions.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that, it's a topic that once you make people aware of it, they start seeing it more. And, after that horrible October 5th, when parents, other parents in my son's school class, are like, oh, I remember seeing this, this bird here, or, killed in a window collision. And every spring I have them all, ask me, it's like, okay, what was that Chicago bird collision monitor number again? And there's one parent that says, I got in my speed dial now, so in case I see any injured birds or dead birds, they can help something out. And so you don't necessarily have to be a birder or an active bird conservationist. It's something that I think touches people beyond our little community here. And when you see these creatures and their amazing journey have it cut short, I mean, it hurts you. It touches your soul a little bit. Annette, you want to take that question from Terry? The question is, have many building management companies shown interest in adopting bird safe practices, lighting, window treatments, etc.?
In general, people don't do anything they don't have to do. So that's why we really feel that addressing building by building, fix this building, change this building, we really have put all of our emphasis in that are, number one, going to reach all the new buildings that are going out there, set the standards for what other buildings can do. And the hope is that at that point, we've had buildings through the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors that have asked us about to do an audit of their building, because even if you cannot fix your entire building, we can identify the most critical area where just doing that portion of the building could make a substantial decrease in bird strikes. So we try to appeal to buildings by showing them where their problem areas are and making it less of a monumental task, and something that will really be very effective and worth the money and effort that they put through to it. It's the same thing with McCormick Place. They're trying to identify what portions of the building would be produce the largest protection for the birds, with the hope that they can gradually do more protection at that building. So yeah, but for 40 years, McCormick Place has known about bird strikes and with a great level of awareness of what was happening, and yet they, until there was this mass casualty, were willing to push it aside and say that, well, we can't afford it, we don't want to do it, it's too expensive. It's we really want to set the example through ordinances that will, make a standard that other buildings are going to want to either try to work with, because retrofitting is a major ask and something that is the next step after we get some of these standards in place that are required. So that's why we're disappointed if the Department of Planning and Development does not make these measures mandatory. And this is only a small step for a certain number of projects. And it would be a major start, but it's certainly not the whole picture. And there's a whole lot more work to be done. And we were hoping that at least this first step would be something that would be welcomed and easily embraced. And we're really hoping that they follow through and make this mandatory, so that we can start along the road to getting the existing buildings in better shape for birds.
Yeah, and the difficulty we have with existing buildings is that there's no practical legal avenue to compelling an existing building to change anything about their building if it was built according to the laws and ordinances at the time it was constructed. There are buildings that have, for example, ADA issues, but they complied with the ADAs that existed at the time they were built. And so that's, the kind of fundamental to building regulations is that you only needed to have complied with the codes and regulations that were in place at the time it was built. So that's why the urgency to get this passed with the city of Chicago is so high, because the lifespan of a typical piece of commercial glass is about 50 years. And so, it'll be 50 years before that building needs to go and apply for a building permit to replace their glass. What we have for existing buildings is public outcry, public pressure. That's what worked for McCormick Place. And the fact that it's a public building also helped us a little bit there too. But for private buildings, once it's built, besides just shame or appealing to the good nature of the people who own that building, those are really our only mechanisms to get them to improve their building.
And shaming seldom works. What happens with shaming is that they come out and they clean up the birds and say there aren't any birds here anymore. And it
Right.
really, the buildings that we have gotten the most cooperation with are ones that there's either the tenants, the people who are renting in that building, the people, there's someone who's working within the organization wants to see a change. We got the FBI building in Chicago to retrofit and add netting to protect areas where birds were striking. I don't think I could have gone and shamed the FBI to fix their building. I think I would have just had a special file somewhere in the FBI is what I would have had if I went there. But because it was FBI agents and people within the company essentially that were saying that this was unacceptable to them, and finding someone within an organization or a client base in a building can often be a really good incentive for the building to want to do the right thing for their essentially their customers or their tenants, and that can often be one of the most influential ways to get a building to be receptive to making changes.
Thanks all. Thanks so much for inviting us here. Laura, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say or any other final points, questions for us?
I don't have any more. I want to thank you for your time today and this interesting presentation. And reiterate, we will put a recording and a PDF of the slides up onto our website. So please check back with us. And if you have a topic that you'd like to host a cafe on, please let me know. I would be happy to work with you to create that and find a date and have another discussion like this on whatever topic. So thank you for your time. And once again, I want to thank the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Urban and Community Forestry Program, and U.S. Fish and U.S. Department of Forest Service for their support to bring us these cafes. So I appreciate your time today.